today's video, we're going to be focusing on the AMAX versus the Grau, which is the best weapon in Modern Warfare. We're going to be looking at multiplayer as well as Warzone, and this is actually a very highly requested video. It was all over my AMAX video, my overall thoughts on whether this is fitting in the meta. They thought I should do a better deep dive in comparison on how these two weapons stack up. And we're going to be covering a lot of comparisons on these weapons. We're going to look at some of the base stats. We're going to look at the fastest ADS possible head-to-head. We're going to look at the lowest recoil possible head-to-head. And we're going to look at some balanced class setups head-to-head. And we're going to take a look at how the damage differs depending on where you land your shots. If you do enjoy the video or learn something from it, do me a favor, hit that like button. Goal on today's video is 2,500 likes, and you guys have been absolutely crushing that. And if you want to find your way back to the channel, make sure you are subscribed with notifications on, so that'll be as easy as possible. So the first thing we'll look at is some aim down sight speed comparisons as well as overall recoil for each of those individual class setups that I was mentioning in the beginning. So for the base Grau without any attachment, you can kind of see the ADS. It's kind of balanced. It does have one of the faster ADS for a rifle in basically the entire rifle category. So that's one of the biggest pluses of the Grau. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the individual recoil pattern. As I line up at this yellow line, you kind of see where the recoil takes it. So that's the recoil pattern there. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the fastest ADS Grau. So this is going to be the fastest ADS Grau, and you can see it is significantly snappier. It probably has one of the fastest ADS in the entire game. And you can definitely see how it does change as we zoom in. Goes considerably faster. Let's go ahead and check out the recoil, aiming at that same yellow line. So if we look at the bottom here, they pretty much start at the same spot, but this one stretches out a little bit further, so you will get considerably worse recoil than the base Grau. Now let's go ahead and look at the best recoil option. So now we have the lowest recoil possible on the Grau, and you can see it has a much slower aim down sight. Let's go ahead and check out the recoil. And as you can see, it cuts it down significantly, but obviously you don't want to be that slow. So let's go ahead and check out a balanced class setup. So with the balanced class setup, we're going to look at the ADS. It is going to be a little bit faster. Obviously not quite as fast as the fastest, but it has kind of a middle ground, still a little bit slower than the primary one. And you're going to see that the recoil ends up falling between the lowest recoil and the worst recoil option. So let's go ahead and start that up again and see how that goes. And as you can see, still pretty tight. That's one of the benefits of the Grau. You can see the bullets are pretty close together. The lowest recoil option, the fastest ADS, and then the stock Grau. Now let's go ahead and take a look at it with the AMAX. So the AMAX is already going to be considerably slower than the Grau. If we look at the ADS, you can see definitely not as fast as we saw it with the base Grau. Now let's go ahead and check out the recoil pattern. Pretty much vertical, has a lot of jumpiness in the beginning, kind of as far as height goes, and then it kind of evens out and it makes it a little bit easier to control. Let's go ahead and see what the fastest ADS looks like. So now the fastest ADS AMAX is going to have much more recoil, but you're going to see it is significantly more snappy, and this is what people would probably use it as kind of like an SMG, which is definitely viable in multiplayer and core game modes and even hardcore, just so you get that extra snappiness since range isn't all as important. Let's go ahead and take a look at the recoil. So as you can see, it did go up into where the metal frame is of the building, the little outside. So there is significantly more jumpiness. So you're only going to really get the advantage of this if your engagements are much closer. Now let's look at the lowest recoil option, which is going to be the slowest aim down sight. So you can see how sluggish it looks even when you let go of the aim down sight, how long it takes to kind of go back to the fully hip fire. Let's go ahead and check out this recoil. And as you can see, it cuts down considerably. It doesn't really have that first jump, but it does have a little bit of wiggle, even though it is considerably tight. Very manageable with this type of recoil pattern. Now let's look at a more balanced class setup, which is kind of in between both of those two. So now this is the balanced class setup. Look at the ADS now. You can see it kind of is a balance between definitely not as fast, and a little bit slower than probably the base, but definitely not as slow as the lowest recoil option. Let's go ahead and check out the recoil pattern on this one. Still very manageable. As you can see, it's still pretty tight. It doesn't really have that leftward curve nearly as much, and it doesn't have that big jump between it. and this ends up being a very controllable one. And this is good for Warzone as well as multiplayer, especially on some of the longer maps, so you can hit those shots. So this is the numbers on the 3 different class setups that I just showed off. We have the fastest right here, the balance, and then the no recoil option. Right here, these percentages are just a percentage change of using that particular attachment. And then we have the slower time in milliseconds or faster because it's shaving it off. The base aim down sight for the Grau is 221 milliseconds and the AMAX is 279. So you can see there is a considerably slower aim down sight, almost 60 milliseconds, which is a big difference in terms of aim down sight time. If we look at the fastest class setups here, we could just use everything to chop down their aim down sight. And you can see we end up like a 99 millisecond aim down sight for the Grau and 189 for the AMAX. When we look at the no recoil attachments, we can see that the compensator, longest barrel, largest mag, ranger or commando, depending on which weapon we're talking about, and then a rubberized grip, we ended with 300 milliseconds for the Grau, and the AMAX ends up being 363. When we look at a balanced class setup, this is kind of where we're stacking some attachments that we can actually use in multiplayer. Maybe we don't want as slow aim down sight. We go with the monolithic. You could always swap that out for something that's not going to slow it down quite so much, but you could go with something else there. We got the longest barrel, the largest mag, commando, ranger, and then the tac laser. And you can see that we end up getting all these attachments lined up, 280 milliseconds for the Grau and 343 for the AMAX. So comparison when it comes to aim down sight time, no brainer. It ends up going to the Grau because it starts off so far ahead. Recoil wise, I still think it's pretty even, but those first initial bullets that come out of the AMAX are pretty aggressive, especially if we're not going with the lowest recoil option. Now let's see how they stack up damage wise. I also decided to expand on my time to kill graphs to make it as clear as possible exactly what we're talking about. We have the AMAX and the Grau right here. The AMAX rate of fire is 645, while the Grau is 750. So we have 100 faster rate of fire there. When it comes to time to kill, which is on the left hand side, this is in milliseconds. So 500 milliseconds would be half a second. When we look at distance, this is all in meters, all the way at the bottom. What we're looking at here is different damage profiles depending on where you hit somebody. With the 5.56 ammos, you're normally going to have 2 different damage profiles pretty much everywhere on the body except for the head, and then headshots. Those are your 2 damage profiles. When it comes to the other types of ammo in the game, they do have different variables here. When it comes to the AMAX, we pretty much have headshots, upper chest, and then everywhere else on the body, which will be the base damage. And now we can compare these head-to-head in core game modes. If we're looking at the fastest damage right here on the bottom, you can get 2 headshots with the AMAX if you hit only 2 headshots back-to-back up to 55, 57 meters there, which is absolutely insane, or maybe about 57.5 meters. Which is absolutely insane, and 3 headshots will get the job done, and you end up with the TTK under 100, but the odds of you hitting 2 headshots, very high because it's only 2 bullets. If it was like 4 or 5 bullets that you needed to land, which we'll talk about when we get into Warzone, that is considerably harder to do. Next up, we have the Grau headshots. And you can see the Grau, if you land 3 headshots consecutively, it'll be able to have the same time to kill all the way up to about 95 meters, which is absolutely insane. Meaning that pretty much anywhere you see someone in multiplayer are going to be able to get that kill. There are some sight lines, maybe on certain maps, or maybe in ground war, where you're not going to be able to get that range. But overall, that will take care of all of them if you land those headshots. And you can see the time to kills is considerably fast for both of those. Then you can see it drops off, and this green line is the AMAX chest, as well as the AMAX base. They're lined up. You don't really get a benefit for shooting chest shots. Just as long as you're not getting in headshots, you're not going to get a faster time to kill. So pretty much anywhere you land on the body, in addition to that upper chest. All the way up to about 35 meters, and then there's a drop off. And then if you're not landing chest shots, you're going to get a slower time to kill. And you can see that goes all the way across. And then right around 55, 57.5 meters, it drops off. And then you need 4 chest shots. And you'll continue to have that all the way across, and that'll just continue for infinity. Then as we get to about 80 meters, if you're not landing upper chest shots or head shots with the longest barrel, it's going to drop off to 5 shots to kill, and you end up with a really slow time to kill over in the 375 millisecond range. Now let's go ahead and compare that with the base Grau, which is going to be consistent no matter where you land it, where you land it in the toe, upper chest, elbow, stomach, it does not matter. It'll be 4 shots to kill and has a very slow time to kill in comparison to the information here. So in core game modes, it's looking like the AMAX comes out top dog as we're comparing these weapons. So you can see it all the way across, comes all the way through. It's going to be 4 shots to kill. Right around 53 meters, it drops off, and then it ends up being 5 shots to kill all the way up to about 95 meters. Then right around 95 meters, it drops off to 6 shots to kill, and then it'll forever be 6 shots to kill. Even if it's 200 meters, it'll be 6 shots to kill. And that is how it works in core game mode. So now let's go ahead and talk about Warzone. In Warzone, we have the same thing, but the time to kills are way slower because you're dealing with 250 damage required to down a player, the 100 base health plus the 150 that you get from having 3 plates. So we're looking at talking about a max health player. We end up with the same scenarios here where they're going to all split off, but based off the different damage values, it's going to split off at different ranges than we saw previously. So right here, if we look at the fastest time to kill, if you only land a headshot, if you got that aimbot on, you're cheating, you're going to be able to get the fastest time to kill possible, or maybe just have God tier aim that day. You are going to get a very fast time to kill and melt with 5 headshots with the AMAX all the way up to about 57.5 meters, drops off to 6 headshots, all the way up to about 80 meters, drops off to 7 headshots. And these are 7 consecutive headshots. When we look at the Grau, 6 headshots, very competitive, all the way up to about 53 meters, drops off, and then 8 shots to kill, and then it drops off to 10. So that one's dropping by 2 shots every one, just because of how the damage works with the Grau. So now when we talk about chest shots for the AMAX, we can get 6 shots to kill. So right around 35 meters, it drops off to 7 shots, 60 meters, drops off to about 8, and then right around 80-ish meters, 83 meters, it drops off to 9 shots. And that's if you're only landing chest shots. And people, if somebody's at 75 meters, you're not going to really control where those bullets go because of the bullet drop. You're going to end up hitting them somewhere, not the chest. So these aren't very practical time to kills because the odds are you're not going to hit all those shots, especially at range, given the bullet drop. If it was hit scan, you could probably do it. But with bullet drop and bullet velocity coming into play, going to be a little bit trickier to hit people once they get around 70-ish meters. Next up, we have the Grau, 9 shots to kill, up close, anywhere, like I said, on the body, except for headshots, and you'll get a consistent time to kill, which is very nice, and it'll be faster if you manage to throw in some headshots. But overall, if we're going to continue from here, you get the same time to kill all the way up to about 53 meters. And that's what it makes the Grau so consistent, because whether you're 5 feet away, 30 meters away, or however long, all the way up to about 53 meters, it's going to take the same number of shots to kill, so the gunfights always feel consistent, whereas some other weapons have significant drop-offs, which don't feel quite as strong. So once we get around there, it drops off to 11 shots to kill, which is 2 additional shots, same thing that we saw with the headshots, and then that continues all the way up to about 95 meters, and then drops off to 14 shots, and that's where the time to kill drops off a cliff significantly. Obviously, you can still get some good time to kill there, but it's going to take 3 additional bullets at range, which is a total game changer if you're getting sniped. Those extra 3 bullets are adding an extra 250 millisecond time to kill, which is a quarter second to your time to kill, and that is if you are 100% accurate. Now, last one to look at is the AMAX, and this is the base AMAX right here. You can see it's 8 shots to kill. Ends up having a little bit slower time to kill, even though it's less shots because of that 100 difference in rate of fire. And that one has a really consistent time to kill, even if you're just landing body shots. And that goes all the way up to about 55 meters, drops off to 9 shots, and then that'll continue all the way up to about 80 meters, drops off to 11 shots, adds 2 shots to kill. So if you get in the combination of some body shots in here with the AMAX and the other shots, you're still going to have a very competitive time to kill. Overall, if we're just looking at this on paper, you would think, man, why doesn't the AMAX just dominate the Grau? And that's what we're going to talk about next. When it comes to multiplayer, I would put the AMAX pretty much ahead of every weapon in the game. I think as far as its versatility, you can get it a little bit faster aim down sight. You don't have to worry as much about range. And you can still be able to maximize your dominance with the AMAX. Grau's an okay weapon. A little bit slower time to kill up close. You're probably going to outgun most people using the Grau if you're using the M4, the RAM, that type of stuff. In core game modes, the AMAX is going to be a very top dog just because of those chest shots and headshots. And that's the same way that the AK, the Odin, and the Scar feel very strong in multiplayer, because you get into those engagements where the bullet drop isn't playing a huge factor, so you are able to get those upper chest and headshots consistently to the point where the time to kill is dropping down significantly. But as we take that experience into Warzone, this is where the differentiator is. I thought I would really like it, and I feel like when you're within about 50 to 60 meters, the AMAX is pretty good. There's scenarios where I was like, man, if I was using the Grau, I would be dominating this situation just because it's such a laser beam. You're you're going to hit a higher percentage of those shots. You don't have to worry about much bullet drop. And the easiest way to identify this for any weapon is when somebody is coming out of the sky and you are trying to shoot them out of the sky. With the Grau, you can pretty much do it at almost any range. M4 is pretty good at it as long as they're not incredibly far away. But most of the weapons in the game, as they start falling out of the sky, that bullet velocity just isn't enough to go ahead and kind of track them properly and take them down while they're in the air. So you get that insta finish when they hit that ground. So that is the biggest differentiator for me. So in Warzone, I think you can make the AMAX just a little bit faster and kind of use it more like an M4, where it kind of does your close to medium engagements, and then maybe you combine that with the sniper. Versus with the Grau, it really dominates at those medium to long ranges, and what you really need up close is the SMG. So I think that really ends up being the comparison. If you're going to use it in Warzone, I highly recommend combining it so you have a little bit more faster mobility with it, and then make it so that you're able to hit longer shots with a sniper rifle. So now let's go and take a look at some of the class setups. So for the Grau, we have a couple different class setups. I already kind of showed you the attachments there, but in case you want a screenshot of what that ends up looking like, we're going to look at the fastest one, which right here, this one already comes in with the built-in grip. We're going to have the 60 round mag. Obviously, you could probably be a little bit faster if you didn't have that. If we go with the rear grip, we can go with the XRK Void 2. Laser, we're going to go attack laser, and then we're going to go no stock. And that's how you're going to get the fastest aim down sight possible. Obviously going to give you some insane recoil. Next one up is the lowest recoil option, and normally you're going to combine the compensator, commando foregrip for most of the weapons. Depending on some of the weapons, you might want to go with Merc or Ranger, but for this particular case, it's going to be compensator with the commando foregrip, the longest barrel because that helps with the recoil, and also having that bullet velocity. And then we can go with the 60 round mag. And then this one kind of just depends on what you want to go with. But for the most part, if you're looking for the best recoil, you're going to go with the rubberized grip, which is going to kind of stack with those other two recoil attachments. And that ends up being a very slow aim down sight, but still a very low recoil weapon when it comes to any of the modes. And then the balanced one, which I'd probably use primarily for Warzone, is a monolithic suppressor. I would still use that. I'd get rid of the rubberized and then go to the tac laser. And then that would be my overall Warzone class setup. If I was going to use this probably in public matches, I'd probably go with the Nexus barrel so I can get a little bit faster aim down sight. And then I'd go with the Void 2. And this would be more my class setup for multiplayer if I was just going to be playing regular core pubs. Now, when we go in and take a look at the AMAX, we're going to look at the fastest one right here. We're going to go with the smallest barrel here. This gives you the fastest mobility. Obviously going to restrict your range a little bit. When we go with the ammunition, we're still going to go with the 45 round mags, stippled grip tape. We're going to go with the tac laser, and then we're going to go with no stock. And that fills out all 5 of our attachments. This ends up being the fastest one. Probably not practical unless you're playing core on the 6v6 or maybe a hardcore where the range isn't all that important and you're still going to be able to get the damage out of the weapon. We're going for the lowest recoil. In this particular case, you can go a couple different options. Like I said, you're going to go with compensator. This one, the best recoil reduction is either the Merc or the Ranger. Ranger has a little bit faster aim down sight, so you can go with that one. If you're going to play it for close quarters like we talked about with Warzone, you might want to go with the Merc so you can get a little bit of hip fire action, since the hip fire on this gun is pretty terrible if you're trying to use it in the hip fire. So let's go with Ranger there. We got the 45 round mag. We're going to go with the rubberized grip tape and the longest Zodiac barrel, and that ends up being the low recoil option. But again, that ends up being a little bit on the slower side when it comes to aim down sight. Again, balance, we go with the monolithic. We're not going to really change much there, and then we're going to switch that to tac laser. This is probably what I'd use in Warzone. If I wanted to play a little bit of multiplayer, I could probably get rid of the monolithic suppressor and maybe put on an optic, or maybe get rid of the tac laser and put on an optic. There's a couple different options there. So these are the options I would go if I was setting up the classes. Hopefully you guys did enjoy the video, learned something new. If you did, please do me a favor, hit that like button. If you're brand new, looking to find your way back, make sure you are subscribed with notifications on. In addition to that, I have started streaming over on Twitch, so if you want to drop a follow, we'll be linked in the description. A ton of you guys have been joining the Discord. I think we're over 1,200 members, and a lot of people are finding groups to play with and having a lot more fun than just playing solo. So definitely check that out if you're interested in joining the community. Appreciate all the support on the content. Thank you for watching. As always, have a great day.